I distinctly remember this one all-hands meeting where the time came for Q&A, and inevitably in these kinds of meetings, someone will stand up and they'll ask a question that's not really a question. It's really just meant for them to look smart. So someone does that. They stand up. Mr. Bezos, don't you think, blah, 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 blah. And they go on. And Jeff looks the person in the eye and says, I think that question just shows you don't really know what you're talking about. The guy turns beet red, turns around, walks out, and all 6,000 of these people give Jeff a standing ovation.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Today, I am very honored to be joined by Mr. Aaron Youngren. Mr. Youngren, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure to be here.
So, quick introduction on you. You were the manager and supervisor, at Amazon for almost 8 years. And then you decided to have a radical change of career and became a pastor in Chicago, correct?
That's right. It's very similar.
Yes.
Those two roles.
And then you were the staff and senior staff program technology manager at GE Healthcare for 2 years, 3 years, somewhere in there?
3 years, yep.
Somewhere in there. And you are currently the founder of Great Commission Design, and you run that, and you're the head of product at Red Balloon, and you're a husband and a father.
That's right. All of those things.
There you go. And author of the new undiscovered book.
That's
which
great.
I have here.
That's great.
Which
Get it
is
right in
all
the beginning.
all about adventure, conquest, and the search for great products. So we'll start with, we'll get to the book in a minute, but what was it like working at Amazon?
So I came into Amazon in an entry-level job. It was early-ish in the company. So Amazon had been around for about 5 years. So past the we just sell books stage and into the we're starting to sell everything stage. And I had an incredible experience while I was working there, starting out as a young man, working in what most people think would be the drabbest, most uninteresting environment you could imagine. I worked in a cubicle, copy paper stacked high, gray padded walls. And I found myself in the middle of having an adventure of a lifetime. Every day exciting, every day a thrill ride. And so working at Amazon was absolutely wonderful during that time. Now, I should say at that time, it was a period of rapid innovation and growth. Amazon had a severe, what I would characterize as a severe meritocracy and a meritocratic mindset, which meant the best ideas, the best innovations, the best work won. There were some times when that mindset strayed into what I would think of as an unbiblical, working environment. But it was tremendously rewarding. We would regularly grow by about 40% every single year. And if you can do compound interest, that's a lot of work. And many of the parts of the company were not actually given 40% more people to do the work. So right. Yep. Innovation was expected. And I just learned a ton. God bless me richly. I developed several products that saved the company a lot of money and ended up running a global innovation team. Got to receive an award from Jeff Bezos himself. It was a pretty wild and exciting time.
Yeah. What do you mean by it was unbiblical? The meritocracy became unbiblical in some senses.
A couple of reasons for that. One, if you think about a father running his household as a pure meritocracy, where at any given moment, the person who's done the most for me lately wins and gets, my affection. That's not great. Now, our businesses, families, I would stand with Reid Hoffman here. Businesses are not families. They're more like a sports team. But even in sports teams, you want to be attentive to the actual people around you. You want to be loving them and working for their good. And so sometimes it's not a simple matter of whoever does the best or has the best ideas wins. You're also developing people, right? You're caring for them and for their souls.
Right. What was it about the sitting in the gray cubicle, padded cubicle, that made it so rewarding for you?
Yeah. So when you are put into a situation in the workplace where there are real stakes, where there is real money at stake, where as in Amazon, you are told that the highest priority is serving the customer well and doing anything that you can to serve them well. And where, by the way, if you're not contributing to that mission, you are not going to have a job. And then you're given sort of enough autonomy to think and invent and grow toward that goal. That makes the workplace very exciting. Now, what I would say, and this is part of why I wrote that book, is most people do not approach their work that way. For most people, coming into work on Monday, having a case of the Mondays, there's a lot of complaining and entitlement because they don't see their work as an adventure. Part of that is they don't have the right approach. They don't have the right worldview that would allow them to see their work as an adventure. Part of that, though, is the environment that they come to, right? So if you're building a company, say you're just loaded on VC money. Well, now the stakes have gone down because someone gave you hundreds of millions of dollars to maybe one day build a profitable product. Who cares if it's profitable or not? You're going to feel the stakes of that relationship a lot less, rather than if someone's putting the transaction of value in front of you at all times, and you're very conscious of whether or not you are contributing to the value of the company. So that's one. The other thing that happens in an environment is when people are constrained and constricted and made to walk in very narrow boundaries, never given any additional responsibility, that's going to make your workplace seem boring in a hurry, right? Because it actually is. You're an image bearer of God, and you're not being treated like one. You're being treated like a robot.
How does that change at a company like Amazon?
So at Amazon, we had, and especially once you started to have a track record of innovation, greater and greater leeway to invent your way out of problems, right? So we talked about innovation a lot, but it wasn't a buzzword. It was, hey, we're facing the need to do 40% more work with the employees that we have. How in the world are we going to do that? Well, we had better examine what we're doing and see if there are any efficiencies that we can gain, see if we can invent our own tools to do the work. And that is what happened over and over. And it was incredibly rewarding.
How have you taken that, what you learned there, into the rest of your life?
That's a great question. So I would say from that moment on, so once I got a taste of that adventure, and then also started to think about how that aligned with scriptural values of loving the people I was working with and loving the people around me and loving the people that we were serving, you almost can't see work the same, right? I'm going to come to work every day and believe that there are things that I can do to not just leave this tidier than I found it, but actually, could I work toward doubling the value that this particular part or process brings for my employer, right? And those little opportunities are there everywhere, especially in a very technological age.
Yeah. How have we lost the sense of that should be our purpose at work?
Well, broadly, as a culture, we have been taught that, indoctrinated, I would say, that work is kind of like taxes. Work is the thing that I show up and do. I pay my dues so that I can go out and do my side gig, so that I can go out and do my watercolor painting or skiing or whatever. I'm an outdoors person. I don't really like the stuffiness of the office. And therefore, I'm just sitting here punching the clock, trying to get to my real life. Sadly, the rest of life is an adventure, right? It is an adventure, but you are now missing out on one of the main gifts that God has given us, which is the adventure of work. Mm-hmm. Proverbs 25:2 says that it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter. Glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter. Meaning, the Lord has created the world in such a way that there are secrets and opportunities everywhere. And part of what it means to be human is to be out in the world looking for those things on behalf of others.
Yeah. So is it wrong if someone feels like, I feel constrained at an office. I don't feel like I love it here. I want to be outside, outdoors. Is that a wrong feeling to have?
Well, it depends, right? If that is coming from a selfish motivation, saying, there's this work thing that I would rather bind up and keep in the smallest compartment possible in my life. If I could, I would be on permanent vacation out there hiking, right? Well, that is wrong, right? That is not what the Lord has called you to do. Now, I think there is plenty of room for someone to say, a young person, a young man to say, I've tried this office thing. I'm looking at my gifts. I'm looking what I'm naturally good at. I'm looking at the needs of the people around me. And I think I should be in construction because it's what naturally comes good to me. We clearly need more of those people. So that's an outward, right? An outward disposition versus an inward disposition where I'm always just thinking about how can I min-max my life to get the most for me. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Did you work directly with Jeff Bezos?
I did not, but I did. I did play dodgeball with Jeff Bezos, and I'm proud to say that I aimed for the head, and because I thought that would be a great thing on the resume. I hit Jeff Bezos in the head with the dodgeball, but unfortunately, the executive team at Amazon was really good at dodgeball.
Really?
So, they were like murderers. I think they had personal trainers for dodgeball. So
I mean, maybe it was on the resume. Like, you got to be good at dodgeball and also this executive thing.
Yeah, that's right.
What makes Jeff Bezos so special?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. If you look at the key leaders of large companies in the last, call it 3 decades, they all kind of share something in common. Jim Collins calls it a cult-like fanaticism when in terms of driving culture in their businesses. And so you have companies like Apple, let's say Apple in the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm. With Steve Jobs.
Yeah. Early Microsoft. You have these companies where the internal dogma is what everyone thinks about all the time. I think there's something about that actually that is very powerful and good. Okay. Obviously it's not good when it's not aimed in a Godward direction. Mm-hmm. So at Amazon, that powerful dogma was we are going to be the world's most customer-centric company. So what you have is a culture of people literally coming to work and sitting down at a desk. This is the entire company, okay? Sitting down at a desk made out of a door and 4x4s because the internal culture of the company was frugality. And the idea behind frugality wasn't frugality for its own sake, but we're going to take the cost of a fancy desk and we're going to pass that on to the customer. So it was like a cultural symbol, right? That we're coming to work and sitting down at these very crude desks, everyone all the way to the top. Okay. So the realizing Jeff, who's very smart and kind of an alien, he's one of those CEOs,
potentially a reptile.
Potentially a reptile. Yes, exactly. Probably could be replaced by a
cyborg or something.
A cyborg, yeah. And you probably wouldn't know. But you have a guy like that who realizes the potential of the digital era to completely break down norms of consumer behavior, right? I mean, and I know this is calling out the obvious, and then doggedly pursues that. I mean, just think about how absurd it was. I don't know if you've ever seen screenshots of the original Amazon.com, but one day you should look them up. I mean, it's like the most atrocious thing you've ever seen in your life, like the original product. You would never think this is going to become one of the world dominant companies and is going to shut down commerce as we know it. You would never think that.
Yeah.
So here you have a guy, a Wall Street guy, traveling across the country, going to Seattle, setting up shop, hiring a bunch of blue hairs and punk rock people to create an online bookstore, which is something nobody had ever heard of, believing that it could be true. Literally, when they opened, there were many months where they had a bell that they would ring every time a book sold, right? It was going that slow in the beginning. So you take that and then you continue that trajectory on, and you have this guy who's driving, relentlessly pursuing excellence towards customer satisfaction. And that leads actually to a bunch of innovation, like one click, which we totally take for granted, like Prime shipping, all of which, by the way, everyone mocked and laughed at in the beginning. When Amazon rolled out customer reviews, which we just take for granted that there's going to be, when I go to a website, there's going to be stars and reviews, and then I'm going to be able to make an objective decision. I mean, he was ridiculed. Manufacturers pulled out. You have no idea how to run your own business. What if people leave negative reviews and they're saying that's the whole point? Like, there's some accountability. Yep. So that is a pretty special thing over time. Now, what I would argue is some of the propellant behind that dogma is highly biblical, right? So on the big E on the eye chart for us, love God and love your neighbor. If you're going to talk about customer satisfaction, it's a very savvy business move. It's what free markets are made, from. But, what better thing to build your business on in that we are going to change the way that people do commerce, and we're going to make it easier for them and more transparent.
Yeah. Why was he so specifically focused on that customer experience as opposed to like some other people? Other people start businesses, but they're there for the money. Was there something special? What was it that was special about him that he was focused so intently on the customer side of it?
That's another interesting aspect, I think, of some of these dominant companies, CEOs, founding CEOs like a Steve Jobs or like Elon Musk now, is you tend to see first principle thinking with a lot of these folks. So for Elon Musk, he's going to consider a question. Wouldn't it be great if there was a way to get from LA to San Francisco? What are all the possible ways you could do that? And then what's physically possible? Right. And then work backward from that. Or Steve Jobs. I think people want to hold, they want to have premium devices. They want to have things that are as easy as possible. Let's start with what the experience should be and then work backward on the device from that. For Bezos, that those first principles, we would talk about this all the time, are that people are never going to complain about better prices, faster shipping, and more transparency, right? They're never going to complain about that. So if we can build those as first principles of the company. Now, why did he do that from a personal standpoint? I have no idea. And at some point, again, if you're a materialist and we're all warm froth riding into the heat death of the universe, none of it matters. As a business move, that's very savvy. Yeah.
Was there one thing specifically that he didn't allow in any of his companies or in, any of his people?
Many things. And I'll tell you a story. But I think that the main thing that I would think of is just there was zero tolerance for BS or perceived BS, right? Zero tolerance. So that crept into everything from, fancy PowerPoints were strongly discouraged. If you were going to use PowerPoint at all, instead of a sheet of paper outlining the facts, It had better be as Spartan as possible because customers are not paying you to put little icons for your other employees in there to make them laugh or think that you're special, right? So that's a great example. Here's a story though. So if you're in a large company and the company this could happen in a small company too, but the company inevitably is going to try to get everybody in a room and have a big rah-rah session, right? And so as Amazon got larger, we had to find bigger and bigger buildings to have these all hands meetings, and we do them once a quarter, and they were pretty cool. So I distinctly remember this one all hands meeting where the time came for Q&A, and the inevitable thing happened. So inevitably in these kinds of meetings, someone will stand up and they'll ask a question that's not really a question. It's really just meant for them to look smart. And then because we're in Seattle and in a tech company, there's also like this little snark that attaches itself to this question. So someone does that. They stand up. Mr. Bezos, don't you think, blah, 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 blah. And they go on. And Jeff looks the person in the eye and says, I think that question just shows you don't really know what you're talking about. So this is probably like, at this point, 6,000 people in the room. The guy turns beet red, turns around, walks out, and all 6,000 of these people give Jeff a standing ovation because everyone hates that so much. But just little things like that in the culture were pretty great. There were things that were not great, but
that's a bummer for that guy. Like it totally backfired.
Never gonna. Yeah,
unbelievable way you backfired this. Yeah,
perhaps it could be a wonderful teaching moment, wonderful turnaround moment for that guy.
And then 6,000 people applauded you leaving and being mocked.
Yes.
What'd you learn and take away? What was your biggest takeaway from Amazon?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway in this very worldly company, actually, I'll mention two things. The first thing would be that you can always do better, right? That you should never approach any job as though it was this sterile, closed box situation. Some jobs you have to leave because they are that, but you should at least try to influence toward some kind of wonderful excellence, right? Try to pursue excellence in that thing. That's one thing. The second thing was a little bit more subtle. I really tried to understand what it would take in this very influential company to be a Christian. Okay. And it became clear that it was okay for me at one point to be a Christian who was good at what I did, and a Christian who had a private life and went to church. Oh, that's fine, right? Oh, that's fine. But, when you work closely with people, eventually you're going to find yourself talking about things of substance. And I had this distinct moment where I realized I'm just going to have to be a rule breaker and not go along if I'm going to be a person of integrity here. And so especially toward the last, call it 3 or 4 years there, where I'm leading teams, I'm traveling around the world, I'm talking to people. When you travel with people for work, there's always the going out to dinner afterwards, and you're in a different environment, you're having an adventure together, and there's always an opportunity to talk about things that really matter, right? And what everybody wants you to do is stay in a very safe lane and talk about your television show and show pictures of your kids. Oh, isn't that cute? But in fact, eternity is at stake at all times. And so I realized if that was going to be the case, I was just going to have to be a rule breaker at that job.
Is that what made you decide to become a pastor?
Partially. I in the midst of my role at Amazon, I was also becoming. I helped plant a church in South Seattle, and I was getting more and more a leader in that church. I became an elder in that church, and I was a part of a church planting movement. And so at some point, in my professional life, I'm traveling to a bunch of cities. I'm working with very high level professionals and smart people. And at the time in the evangelical world, there was strong momentum to go into cities and plant churches. Okay. You had guys like a Tim Keller, out in New York post 9/11, growing an enormous congregation that was curious about Christianity because all of a sudden they realized that evil existed again. And not recycling. There was this little precious moment there. Who knows where that went? But they realized that happened. And so there was strong momentum towards planting churches in cities. And so we made a decision to move to Chicago, halfway across the country, and plant a church in a big city.
Because of that movement that was generally happening?
That's right.
So you did found the church?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. What was your biggest, how did your background in business help you as you kind of sought to found the church, run the church, and grow the church?
Well, it helped me understand the people that were around us. So we lived in the Lincoln Park area, which is about a mile south of Wrigley Field. And it's one of the wealthier neighborhoods in the country. And filled up with a lot of the same kind of people that I was working with on a day-to-day business or day-to-day basis at Amazon.com. In addition to that, there were a lot of people that came to Chicago in order to pursue excellence in some way. So you have, some of the most well-known coffee shops in the country, if not the world. You have for a while, just a couple of blocks down from me, a restaurant that's recognized as the best restaurant in the world, Alinea. And so we had a lot of those folks in our church, and being in that environment certainly helped quite a bit. Now, I will tell you in retrospect, I didn't know this at the time, or I probably wouldn't have done it. These large cities, and I would even go so far as to say that entire movement of metropolitan church planting in America is, I don't believe, very tenable right now. I don't think that. I think it is really hard to plant a church no matter where you are. And in these centers of materialism, in these centers of, every anti-God sentiment that you can have, really. I mean, just look at Paris, we were just talking about.
Yeah, the Olympics.
You are pushing against such a tidal wave of ungodliness. To do that, and particularly to do that how people in our church planting network did, which is you kind of parachute a lone guy in there, and that person is, just working in the cities. I actually arrived in the 5-year period that I arrived. There were several other church planters that arrived. Not one of their churches made it. Or I should say, not one of their churches made it without pretty seriously compromising themselves.
Yeah. If you were to do it differently, what would you do now?
Well, I don't know. Older and wiser, the Lord used that time tremendously in my life and the life of my family. And a lot of the way that I think about things like product and excellence came from that time, trying to minister to those people. So I don't know that I would rewind the clock, but if someone was coming to me now and saying, is this a good idea? I would say, well, can you get 100 families to go and all buy houses in the same area and start a community? Because that's the only way I would see that you would have even a chance, is to make some kind of outpost there and do it together. Or I would say, there are a lot of places for you to work, son. It doesn't have to be in the middle of this city. That's a very attractive lifestyle to a lot of people. It was very attractive to me. Chicago, especially at that time, was a fun place to live in. You can't ride the L on the Brown line into the Loop without just feeling, this is an amazing city. But unfortunately, we all have to live and raise families. There are things that are a lot more important than living in a cool city.
And Chicago now has kind of fallen apart.
Yes. Chicago is reaping the whirlwind of, call it 50 plus years of the latest wave of poor policy, ungodly thinking, corruption. It's fallen apart.
What was your biggest takeaway from being a pastor?
I think that time in particular allowed me to focus on, if I can say it this way, just loving the Word of God and the way that the Word of God intersects with real life. And a lot of what I would talk to our parishioners about on a day-to-day basis was their work. Now, a lot of times I was telling them, you need to stop doing this and like get married and grow a family, or you're about to get divorced if you keep doing this because it's consuming you too much. But when we would talk about, is there a place in the kingdom of God for a great cup of coffee? I would have to answer that question. And I would want to answer that question. And by the way, yes, there is.
Yes, there is.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And then you moved on to GE Healthcare.
That's right.
So what's the difference between GE Healthcare and GE? Because GE seems to be just giant.
Correct. Yeah. So in a way they're culturally, the GE Healthcare, the era of GE that I came into was almost the opposite of Amazon.com. Now they're both Fortune 100 companies, but I actually, as a young man, read a number of books by Jack Welch, who was a kind of a superstar CEO and a turnaround of GE. Really loved them. I expected that was the GE that I was going to come to. Instead, I found myself at an era of GE where kind of the modern corporate rot in corporations had really seeped into its soul. For example, just very difficult, if not impossible, to fire anyone.
Yep.
Because the standards are lowered so much that you can't fire anyone. Some of the ill effects of globalization. So when you're managing a team all across the globe, as I did, and managing the workforce all across the globe, you can't help but have some lack of cultural unity in that. And then far more serious problems. So all of the DEI and wokeism by that time had completely penetrated that corporation. So you're getting, it's weird because GE's kind of an old stodgy company. It's been around forever. So it had its own veneer on this. It wasn't the same veneer as like a tech company would be, but you have things like, I would get emails, and everyone in the company would get emails from a senior president over North America saying, this incident, this shooting that happened literally 24 hours ago is clearly an example of, inherent racism in the police force, and we have to take action. Well, what happened to due process? And then, inevitably these things, the facts would come out and it was clearly not that, it was clearly something else.
And why do we need a company-wide email?
Correct. I would get on, I remember getting on a call with about 600 people, and the first 25 minutes was this Cuban gay guy's coming out story, and we were all supposed to, and of course the emojis in the chat are just going wild, you go, girl, guy, whatever, all kinds of strange things. And then, of course, they went right along when the vaccine madness came. Everybody was immediately working remotely, and they eventually rolled out a vaccine mandate, which is why I left.
Which is why you left. Where did that corporate rot come from?
That's a great question. So before I answer it, I want to maybe describe what it looks like.
Okay.
So just imagine you're in one of the world's leading companies, and you jump on a conference call and you see number 2, number 3, even number 10 at this company jump on the conference call and begin talking. Well, you usually can make a number of assumptions about that person. This company is so successful. Surely they're there for a reason. Surely they got where they got through intelligence, careful, analysis of data,
hard work.
They've accomplished things.
Right.
Then you hear this person repeat, as if from a teleprompter, every stereotypical DEI training line that you've ever heard, right? They're saying these sentences that you have heard rehearsed in social media and in media in general over and over. The sentences don't come from them, and it's being presented to you as though they just had an epiphany, right? And they're using cry voice, right? I've come now to understand my own culpability in the general plight of blah, 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 blah. So you have this thing that is almost like a 1970s alien invasion movie happening, right? Like this person goes into, a monotone, repeats these things. Where does it come from? Well, we found out later where it came from, because in 2023, 40% of those same executives' bonuses, which are massive, and for many of them constitute the bulk of their salary, were all tied to DEI goals. 40%. And that resulted in 94% of the workforce in S&P 100 companies being minority hires. 94%. So it was actually, unfortunately, just a very cynical, trendy move in which people that are otherwise supposed to be smart and really do have cultural leadership, I mean, they really do have power, making a quick buck off the backs of brown-skinned people and women.
Yeah. What is the unique opportunity that people who work hard and are actually in that executive position or the position they're in at the company have, because they are there for the right reasons?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I believe every thinking person and Christian, and I would just say thinking person as well, think about people that have been blessed to grow up in a Christian world, right? And have some of the aroma of that still. All of those people are in a day-to-day tactical battle where they have to ask, am I going to go along with this or am I going to create something new? There are opportunities in two directions. The first direction is there's a huge opportunity provided by the refusal of leadership in these powerful companies to listen to common sense. That is an opportunity, because if you are not going to act according to common grace and common sense, I can go out and build a competitor that's going to clean your clock, right? Now that's going to be hard work too, but I could. But the other thing is, as we're seeing now, stupid doesn't last forever. And eventually there is going to be a leadership gap and a leadership need, right? I'm sure if you were close to the marketing department at Bud Light after they made the Dylan Mulvaney move, I mean, it is your time, right? If you were common sense guy all along, and the board members are looking for who can we trust in this thing who's not a just zombie, right?
Right.
That is your moment.
Yeah.
So for some people, just sticking it out and being faithful. Now, again, you're going to need to be a rule breaker. You're going to need to demonstrate your integrity through that time, because if you were just if you were a yes man, oh yeah, sounds great. Yeah, let's go with that. Well, you gave up your integrity. Nobody's going to know that in your secret heart, you're actually someone who has some common sense.
Right. Yeah. So waiting for stupid to fall off the edge of the train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's your shot, baby.
And then jumping in.
That's right.
Yeah. Artificial intelligence has been in the news, big buzzword recently. Do you think artificial intelligence is generally a good or bad thing? And does it really matter now that, I mean, it's already being developed and growing by wild leaps and bounds?
Yeah. Well, let me answer the second question first. I don't think that your sentiments about whether artificial intelligence is good or not, or mine. My sentiment about whether it's good or not are I don't think that's going to stop the deluge of artificial intelligence products, tools, and weapons from being developed. Nothing's going to stop that now, I don't think. And the reason why I say that is even with the latest artificial intelligence-driven products like large language models, there are already open source models that are just nipping at the heels of all of the most powerfully funded products that have been made so far, right? So the open source products are just right behind what's already out there. So let's get that out of the way. I find the Christian consternation over artificial intelligence to be somewhat wrong-headed. And I walk this out pretty carefully in my book, and I'll give you the short version. Okay. Let's talk about the threat of artificial intelligence and the opportunity. Okay. From a threat perspective, some of, again, the most vocal and powerful leaders in the world right now cannot stop thinking of artificial intelligence as a singularity threat, the end of civilization. You have Elon Musk, who, is not always perfectly sane, but you have him, saying things like the entire civilization will collapse if we do not control artificial intelligence. When I look at scripture, I find that to be just not true. Right? Because artificial intelligence is never going to achieve dominance in the world. Christ has dominance over the world. So could it have destructive power? Yes. But the Lord has actually made humans a little lower than the angels, given them the image of God. They are not likely to be supplanted by what they create. I think if we think that that's the case, we have a higher estimation of our own powers of creation than we ought.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So from a threat perspective, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy that there's this looming threat of artificial general intelligence. Now, that said, I think that that artificial intelligence clearly is very powerful.
Yep.
I think there are it presents new challenges in terms of our ability to create something highly destructive. This is not the first time that's happened. It happened with the atom bomb. It's happened all throughout history and the progress of technology. Okay.
Right.
So yes, we ought as Christians to try to think clearly about it. But it seems to me when I hear a lot of Christians that it's almost as if there are no scriptural principles which might help us govern artificial intelligence. And so what I lay out in my book is a simple framework for how to think from scripture. And again, to give you the short version, if you trained up a baby Rottweiler, right, and you trained it to be a fierce fighter, but to love people, and then you let it go on a playground, and it caused a massive amount of destruction with small children, do you think we might have some biblical law for how to deal with that situation and who would be at fault?
Right. It's kind of your responsibility.
It's your responsibility.
You trained the Rottweiler.
That's
right. Yeah.
That's right. So the first thing when we're talking about these things is I have a framework that I call the DAAGI framework, DAAGI. Your artificial intelligence has to be dominable, meaning there has to be a kill switch. It has to be like the ox in scripture where there's a fence. If the ox gets out of your property and gores someone and it's the second time and your fence was broken, that's on you, right? Part of the problem that's happening right now is there is, because of the advent of corporations and corporate law, there is not really anyone at fault if Tesla's car goes rogue and kills 40 people, right? So who is responsible for that? Well, what kind of responsibility are we talking about? Are we talking about, well, we made a mistake and people have been sacked? That's not the kind of responsibility that needs to be there. It actually needs to be personal legal responsibility if we're going to create things with this power. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So once you have established that and you're committed to building things with a kill switch, things that you have dominion over, right? Just like animals, okay? You have dominion over, then in my mind, the sky's really the limit for what you create. I don't think there's any problems actually with the rest of what artificial intelligence does. So dominable, artificial intelligence is prized because it is autonomous. Okay. Building things that can run without us there, very helpful. Guess who did that? The Lord did that, right? The Lord made these weird beings called cows, which we can just put in a pasture. And then after a while, we're going to have milk. But if we had to tell the cow, take 4 steps and then turn left, and then turn left again and take 4 steps and chew, it wouldn't be as useful. The fact that it's autonomous is what makes it useful. And so I think we should be using these things to the fullness of God's glory, as long as we keep dominion over them.
To the fullness of God's glory, though.
That's
keeping
right.
in mind that
yes,
it can be used perversely. And what you're saying is that as long as we can kill it, like AI is not in the Bible. It doesn't mention that, but it does mention the nature of humans. And so from that, we can infer that humans will always be on top because we are creatures, we are made in God's image, and because he has ordained that from the Bible. Not because the Bible says, artificial intelligence is not going to overtake you. It just says that, you are made in the image of God. And
correct. And this is not to say that evil men cannot use technology for evil purposes.
Right.
That's absolutely true. And there are so many ways that artificial intelligence can be used for evil purposes. But it is to say, look, there are analogous situations in Scripture for some kind of intelligence that is adaptable and generative and autonomous. Okay, they're called animals. And we have laws around when you own an animal, you do this.
Right. How does a general man on the street stop a big company who's developing AI from creating it without a kill switch or without legal responsibilities, or if this goes wrong, it's this person's fault?
Yeah, well, this is why we have to be pursuing excellence, and we have to be ambitious as Christians, because there are stakes in these things. It's going to be a long time, I think, before evil men stop using technology for their evil purposes. But, Christians need to be able to harness the destructive powers of technology too.
Right.
So if a Christian, this gets into some sketchy territory, but I go there in the book, so I'll bring it up. Is there a place for a Christian to develop software or develop AI that is destructive, but it is destructive for positive ends? For example, let's say, God forbid, someone took an unflattering shot of my daughter in a moment that she didn't mean and posted it all over the internet. And now there's a photo on the internet. Well, I would use every means at my disposal to get rid of that photo forever, right? I would use anything that I could do to destroy that photo. Frankly, I would not care that it is that person's personal property. You know, I would get pretty aggressive.
Right.
And getting that thing off of the internet because he stole something. I'm a man, I'm a father, I'm supposed to protect my daughter, I'm supposed to protect my wife. I have a greater responsibility to protect women in general as a man. Okay? Now, just take that scenario and make it much larger. What if one of these super genius engineers that we come into contact with in our workplace broke off and developed a pornography eating virus that swept the globe and destroyed every ounce of digital pornography that existed, so that in a moment, all of the shame of those mothers and daughters and sisters in the world vanished in an instant. So that any time you tried to put new pornography on a digital device, it would just get eaten, in an instant. Well, I mean, that's personal property, right? It probably, well, not probably, it does violate the law. You'd probably go to jail. But would the Lord smile on that?
Probably.
The
world would be a better place.
So I think as Christians, we need to start thinking about business in general and culture in general for what it really is. It really is a war. I'm not saying go bomb the abortion clinic, but we need to actually be well acquainted with weaponry in this war, with digital weaponry, which is what AI will become and for sure is now, right?
Right.
We need to understand it, and sometimes we need to be ready to use it.
How far does that go?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Is the line furry?
I don't know if the line is fuzzy or furry. I think that let me put it to you this way. Is the law which protects pornography right now? Pornography is just an easy example, right? Because if that was to go away, you would be taking someone's property and livelihood. If someone made their livelihood off of exploiting mothers and daughters, and
right, or like OnlyFans or something like that.
Correct. So I don't think the laws that govern pornography are just. I think that there is, I think I'd be unwilling to say it's a moral certainty that the destruction of all of it would be perfectly fine. I suspect that the Lord would smile. I suspect that the Lord would smile.
Yeah.
It's not causing personal harm to take it away to someone. You're not directly harming an individual. You're just covering, you're covering over the shame of.
In the same way that if you decided to take down a drug kingpin, yes, you are taking away his personal products and personal livelihood, the way of making his living. But you are, like, that's what the police do.
Correct.
Is they say, okay, this is evil. It is destroying people. It is destroying our community. Yeah. So we are going to take this down. And porn is very similar to drugs in that manner.
Right. And look, is it your job? Are you authorized to do that work as a young man sitting at a computer trying to please the Lord? No, you are not. But there may be a scenario in which you do it anyway.
But to an extent, if the government isn't stepping in and actually doing their job, if the government has become compliant with, or at least is okay with the idea of pornography being all over out there, then is it a Christian's job to stand up for what he believes, right? To kind of do what the government should be doing.
Yeah. Let me give a more careful response. I would at least want us to know what the button looks like. I would at least want us to have the kind of intelligence and power to say, well, they're not doing it. We do have the button that could destroy it all. I think that we need to be excellent and aggressive in our learning.
Yeah. How have you been helped in your day-to-day life and work with artificial intelligence?
Well,
are there tools you would recommend to people who are, have heard of AI but have not really come into contact with it, except for maybe ChatGPT?
Sure. You have, I think, well, ChatGPT is actually a very powerful tool. One of the first tools that has mass appeal. Okay. The things that people have been using artificial intelligence for thus far, commercially, let's say, in businesses. So they'll use it for recommendations. People have been doing that for a long time, where using the data provided by your profile, I can determine that you are kind of like Steve, and Steve likes these things, and therefore I'm going to recommend these things to you, right?
Right.
Artificial intelligence has been doing that for quite a while. That is a tremendously hard thing to actually implement well. And I have been a part of several teams at large companies that have been working on projects like that. It's just difficult. But artificial intelligence itself is creeping into a lot of the things that we do already. So whether we're talking about the way that your phone understands your speech, the way that you do get recommendations in day-to-day life, traffic mapping, things like that, AI is kind of already here in a very practical way. There is an opportunity, though, with these large language models, I do believe, so a ChatGPT or Claude or things like that, there is an opportunity for small to medium-sized businesses to find some efficiency. I find as a product designer, it helps me prototype really fast. Because I'm cutting out some of the grunt work. It's not work that I need to be excellent at. I'm going to throw it away anyway.
Right. Yeah. How do we implement accountability for artificial intelligence going rogue? Is that the government's job? Let's say that a Tesla does go, the code goes wrong and it goes on a rampage and drives through the farmer's market.
It is, I believe, the government's job to enact laws that will hold people accountable for the things that they create. And I would say that because of Deuteronomic law of governing, like we just talked about, what happens when an ox gores someone, right? I do think that the government, from biblical principles, should enact those kind of laws. The problem is what the government wants to do is not to enact laws with severe penalties and assign personal responsibility to actual people. Right. What the government wants to do is come in the middle of your project planning and say, okay, here is, a 9,700 page guide for what you can and can't do with AI. And by the way, you will submit to audits every 3 months so that we can personally ensure that your innovation is within our boundary lines. That absolutely should be avoided, right? So what I would argue for is severe personal penalties for failing to take responsibility for your artificial intelligence.
Or for failure to create an artificial intelligence correctly.
Correct. Absolutely. Severe penalties for that. And then no involvement with commerce on a day-to-day basis.
But kind of do what you want as far as developing it and creating it.
That's right.
Yeah. What are the possibilities of AI, and where do you think is too far?
Well, here again, I might take a little bit of I have a little bit of a different perspective, I think, than most people. So most people fear AI becoming too powerful in terms of in like a Terminator kind of way, right? Artificial general intelligence. It's going to learn until what they're really talking about is learning in a way that will surpass human intelligence and wisdom
and capabilities.
Yeah. And I just think that's hogwash. Okay. I'm not saying that AI could not learn to mimic what a human does, because clearly that's true.
And do it better. Like become smarter than the smartest human.
So I'm happy to say that an AI powered robot could serve hamburgers at McDonald's, right? But I actually don't think that the image bearers of God have this huge investment in being able to serve burgers at McDonald's, right? I don't really care about that. I don't really care about that.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy to let them do that, right?
Right.
And I actually don't have any fear whatsoever about AI displacement, say, of white collar jobs. Okay.
Of white collar. Okay.
Of white collar or even blue collar jobs. I do not care about that at all. And I'll tell you why. Because in a society in which people are trying with all of their might to provide value for their neighbor and to become excellent themselves, right? I'm going to become excellent in what I do, and I'm going to provide for my neighbor, and give them more and more value for less and less resources. In that society, everyone looks at that AI McDonald's hamburger and says, that's a great thing, right? Or the truck, the truck driver scenario. Again, we've got real ox goring the neighbor problems with truck drivers. Okay.
Correct.
That's real. That needs to be dealt with. But let's just say that happened. It was all good. All of those truck drivers are facing an inevitable possibility of losing their livelihood. Okay. In a Christian society where we all want the good of our neighbor, and now all goods, the cost of all goods just went down by 10%, just say.
Right.
We love this.
Yeah.
Right. And those truck drivers are going, again, I'm mostly talking about a post-millennial, society, but those truck drivers are going, well, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. I'm going to go be excellent at something else, or I'm going to manage my own fleet of trucks, of AI driven trucks or something like that. I just don't see that as bad. Now I do think in a sinful world that, where now all of a sudden it's tax dollars paying for all those displaced truck drivers, we've got some real problems.
Which it probably will be.
But we've got problems anyway, right?
Yeah.
We've got those problems anyway, and the presence or lack of AI, it just doesn't come into the equation for me.
Kind of throws that out the window. What are your thoughts about giving AI a physical body, like Optimus, the Tesla's automatic AI robot?
Right. I think that I don't oppose it on a product level or like on an efficiency level or anything like that. I do oppose it on a spiritual level. I think that your desire to create, not your desire, but these leading tech companies' desire to create a humanoid robot that does human things better than humans do reveals a real rebellion against the word of God, because God gave a special place to humans. He put humans actually in charge of the earth. He gave humans dominion. He gave humans his image. And so in the same way that, not quite the same way because we have a direct command for this, but of course you would never, I personally object to, for instance, filmed depictions of Jesus, right? Because we're getting way too close to making a graven image.
Yep.
In the same way, I feel like it is just poor taste and really on shaky ground to try to go too far in this humanoid robot direction. Humans are special. That's
Right,
what I'm trying to say.
Humans are special, but to an extent, like monkeys look slightly like us, and we're not saying that like they don't have the image of God. And part of the
No, but this actually, if I could interrupt, this
Go ahead.
actually is the exact point I'm making. So, who are the first people who want to point out that how much gorillas look like humans?
evolutionists generally.
Correct. And so they're noticing of that. Not noticing the difference, noticing the extreme similarity is part of their worldview. Most of the tech leaders that we have running these megalithic companies have a materialist worldview. What's going on inside of your brain and mine and your body and mine is nothing more than a bunch of ones and zeros clanging up against each other, right? It's nothing different, actually. We just have very sophisticated computers in our heads. And so I think the desire to make something so humanoid reflects an inner belief that humans are not very different. You'll get Elon Musk to admit that human consciousness is special. You know, he will not tell you why. He actually said that in an interview. When pressed on the matter, why shouldn't we by one of his friends, why shouldn't we let AI take over? What if our time is done? He just kind of got angry and said, well, humans are great. Human consciousness is pretty special. You know?
Yeah, but part of that is because he's a human. And
Right.
we don't really want to be replaced.
Right.
But is that just because we live in a sinful world that we should be wary of giving AI a human body?
No, I haven't thought about this a lot, so this is a little bit of a gut reaction, but I think if we were in year 10,000 in that blessed coming kingdom, and we were making things that looked like humans, I think it would be incredibly poor taste given the fact that God blessed us with his image.
So are you saying that because we are made in the image of God, we don't want to kind of make that of lower quality?
Yeah. Yeah.
By making an AI robot that looks like a human.
I mean, make a robot dog. They've got those. They're kind of awesome. They're terrifying.
With machine guns on the back of them.
Exactly.
Very terrifying.
Exactly.
But like you would not object to something that doesn't. How close is that line between this looks kind of human, right? Because it has 2 legs and it has 2 arms and some sort of camera visual, like a head, basically. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then there's a droid from Star Wars. And then there's like the Optimus robot in 5 years, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right? Where is the line where it becomes, this has gone too far?
Well, I hate to keep pressing the point, but I think this really gets to the heart of why I wrote this book that I wrote, which is, what does it mean to honor the Lord in all things? What does it mean to create a button on your website that honors the Lord? Right? Think of how many people would know how to answer that question. I don't. I think we got to be thinking about it for a long time.
Not many.
And I do think part of it is an awareness and a total reverence for what God has done in what we create. So if I'm sitting down and thinking about how do I create something amazing that serves humans, I'm not just thinking about function, right? But I'm also thinking about form. What is the story that God's telling in the world? How should that story affect what the shape, what the contours, what the function of this thing should be? How can I reflect God's story in this thing? Just personally for myself, I would not then want to fill the world with beings that look fairly human, but that did not come from the procreative act of men and women. That came about in a much different way, that we're human created. And I wouldn't really want to even get close to the line in the same way that, good fathers should counsel their daughters not to have a discussion about skirt lengths, right? Is 1 inch okay? 1 inch above the line, below the line? Where should it be? Well, you're kind of thinking about it wrong.
Right. The goal is modesty, not...
you want to be reverent in those decisions, right?
Yeah. What do you think about then human prosthetics that are artificial intelligence, such as, arm gets blown off in war and they create a new arm that, the nerves connect or something. And
Great question. And I'm actually all for that. So,
right.
And I'm all for that because the person is still there, right?
It's because of the soul.
Yeah.
Is that what we're getting at? Is like, if it has a soul, then using AI to, he lost his arm or he lost his leg or something like that, right? Is not dissimilar to he's using a wheelchair.
That's correct. And I think you are restoring the honor and dignity that the Lord gave to that person by restoring their limb. Now, I will say we're definitely going to quickly get into, I call it within the next 50 years, we're going to get to the place where people can electively have those surgeries, right?
Right.
I can electively chop my arm off and replace it with a zap cannon or a Nerf gun or something like that,
A Nerf gun would be a poor choice.
Yes, it would be a poor choice.
Go for the zap cannon.
It would be a poor choice, but let's be real. When the furries can start putting actual fur on, and you are going to hear arguments. Don't they have the right? Isn't it their body? All of that. I wouldn't do that because I want to honor the fact. Why did God make my hand like this? I don't care that I wish I had 7 fingers and one of them was a screwdriver. I want to know. I want to honor what God did, not what my pea brain can think up.
Right. But so having a robot that has 4 arms and one of them is a flamethrower is not bad because it's not a cheap, and this may be a little out there, but in a similar way to in the Lord of the Rings when you have the orcs.
Yes, exactly.
Where it's like you have a human, but it's a human's version of a human that a human made.
That's right.
That's kind of what you're getting at, is be wary of that, because it's not humans' job to make humans, it's God's job.
That's right. And I think that's a nearly perfect analogy. So.
Okay, there we go. So, yeah, and then the question is, where's the line? Is Optimus is that too far, or is that because he doesn't have a face? It doesn't there's a whole bunch of things, and you can very clearly tell this is not human,
right? As
opposed to 20 years down the line when that line may be blurrier.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I just wouldn't want to get anywhere near too far. As if it was me designing it, I'm saying.
Right.
I would not want to get anywhere near too far, looking ahead, looking toward our tendency to want to perfect things and knowing that the technology is going to get better and better. But I envision a future in which the products that we make are so deeply thoughtful and honoring to the Lord that we would look back on products from this era and just laugh, right? Just laugh at how absurd they are. I think we will be in 50,000 years, we'll be sitting down to the dinner table and sitting on chairs that are hand carved with scenes from every major story from Scripture etched into them, chairs that you would pass down for 20 generations, set with fine and precious stones, just to give you an example, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if we're not looking 10 years or 20 years, but we're looking 10,000 years into the future of Christian products, I think we want that to set the tone for what we make now. And I guarantee you, people in that era will be reluctant. Well, I don't guarantee you. I suspect people in that era would be reluctant to make something like a humanoid robot.
Yeah, if you always...
Boy, did we get out on the skinny branches here.
Yes, we did. But if you think if you're always thinking 20 years ahead, generally you're going to make better decisions.
Sure. And if you think 10,000 years ahead, then hopefully you will have true vision to guide what you're doing now.
Right. What do you think is the optimal amount of technology/AI in our day-to-day lives?
As much as would help us have dominion and excellence. I would personally prescribe no limits other than to say, is this taking away from the unique things that the Lord has instructed me to do? For instance, if someone introduced a product that would just brilliantly train my child in the way of righteousness.
Or immediately teach them French.
No, those are two different things, right?
Okay.
So I have an AI product, and it's this slick little device. You put it in front of your child, and interactively, it is going to train them up in the way that they should go. I would say, not interested. Sorry, that's dad's job.
Right.
Right. And I'm not going to farm that out to AI.
Right. In the same way that we shouldn't farm it out to the government. Exactly
right. Right. But you and I had to pick a time to come here and have this conversation, right? We had to say it's going to be 1 p.m. and does that work with your schedule? Hold on, let me pull out my phone. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to let AI handle every single little bit of that.
Yeah.
Where it hears me say, and privacy is another issue, but supposing I had assured privacy and it could hear me say, I want to meet with Jackson, and it just made it happen because your little
my calendar,
computer,
your calendar
intelligence, and my calendar intelligence made it happen. I'm totally good with that.
Yeah. So to paint kind of a picture, there's on the one end, I think there's Dune, which did a good job of, like, they have the little orb of light that follows them around. Right. And on the other end, there's the creator.
Right.
And you're saying that kind of somewhere in between there, or like, is the creator actually, that's fine?
No, the creator, which I did happen to see.
Yeah.
No, the creator is full of these, I mean, from my perspective, kind of barf bag, humanoid, robots. That's way over the line to me. No, I guess I'm just saying these things, I would put no boundary lines on them other than what would compel them to be obedient to Scripture, other than humans having the right kind of dominion over them. Other than that, as far as I'm concerned, the sky's the limit. Look, if we're having a conversation right now, Simon Sinek makes this point very well. Right now, around dinner tables across our country, people are having dinner or having conversations like this, right?
Yep.
Okay. Can our technology do a better job of telling us what we need to know when we want to know it and keeping us away from distraction in the important work of being family? I think it probably could.
Right.
Could AI be a part of that? I think it probably could. But it's going to take some product designer thinking about, is it like good for us to have this thing, or like I'm constantly paying attention to my pocket, like, oh, that was a buzz. That was 2 buzzes. I wonder what's happening.
It might be important. Yeah. Right.
I think we could do a lot better with intention, with the intention to honor God.
But it's in the jobs that are not eternal, like raising your children, going to church, those kinds of things are honoring, loving your wife, honoring your husband. Those kinds of things have been constant throughout time, that we must do those. And those are the kinds of things that God commands us to do. Working hard, God commands us to do. But God doesn't command us to use Outlook calendar.
Correct.
Right. And so if Outlook is replaced
Lord
by
help us if that was the case.
if Outlook is replaced by a new AI calendar that is much faster, more efficient, it creates time for you to be able to do those eternal things more often with more frequency and better, right? You're not looking at your phone. Then that's kind of the right amount.
That's right. I also think there is a pinnacle of excellence that we get to strive for as bearers of God's image that is irreplaceable by AI. So, in the next 100 years, if things go into a positive direction and we're not in serious decline where we have like kind of a dark ages, but if things are actually progressing up and to the right, I think we're going to see a resurgence of human crafted, excellent things, right? Human paintings, human, all those things. Why? Because that whole bottom to mid-tier level of cheap art, cheap
Pollock
production, correct. That's all gone.
Right.
That's
it may be that we have tools that are more sophisticated that allow us to create more art that's better and quicker.
Right. Yes, absolutely. But those things which did not require excellence in the first place, right? They did not require craft and skill. I'm totally okay for those to just be wiped out as professions by AI.
Right. How wary should we be of AI and specifically of the creators of AI, and how do we involve that wariness in our decision making individually and corporately?
I think it's going to sound like I'm going backwards now, but AI as a tool, I think we can pursue as Christians. AI as something controlled by massive corporations that have an anti-God worldview, I think we should be very wary of. I think we can, I have no problem. I have a ChatGPT account. I have no problem going in there to quickly, as I said before, whip up a prototype or whip up a little bit of code that I don't need to know ever for my vocation. I don't need to become excellent at it, and I don't have the time to become excellent at it. I'm happy to use it for that. If I was to instead be asked to upload all of my family photos, for instance, upload all of your family photos into this magical AI
cloud, we'll call it.
Cloud, right? And in return, you get whatever, some amazing montage, animated montage. I would not do that. And that is because we have seen, number one, government proliferation into all of these companies.
Yep.
Right? Meta is going to be an absolute leader in AI, and Meta is totally infiltrated by government. I would have zero confidence that they would not sell me up the river.
Right, and by the woke mind virus.
Absolutely.
It's called.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Asking AI to generate images of George Washington, and it comes out black.
That's right.
It's just a complete misunderstanding of what you're here for, and it's not to push a DEI agenda.
That's right. And so things like, for instance, AI compilation of the news.
Helpful.
Could be, as long as I get the source.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
So if I'm only ever reading AI generated aggregations, well, now I'm back to highly skeptical. I'm not going to do that. I want to go to the actual source.
Right. And you should always be wary, in the same way that currently we should be wary of news and be going back to the sources, even though we kind of lost that and are now dependent on it, and also immediately trustworthy of it for some odd reason still.
And the same thing applies to actually asking general questions. People will ask, can you tell me the history of XYZ, back to your woke point. These large language models were not trained on some Platonic repository of perfectly pure information.
Right.
They're just trained on the internet.
Yep. That's
it. They're trained on Wikipedia, news articles, and everything else out there, and they will embody that worldview.
Yes.
So,
yeah. So all of this kind of leads into your book, Undiscovered. What made you decide to write it?
I wanted to write that book primarily for myself and my kids, as weird as that sounds. I wanted to, in a very disciplined fashion, work through core fundamentals of business. Every business will exist only if it finds a product. And so for myself, as a leader, as a product leader, I have always been a first principles kind of guy. I always want to go down and touch the foundation and make sure the foundation is solid. So I wanted to do that. And the problem that I was addressing is this. In the same way that the myth of secularization has pervaded into the rest of our society, so that we think that it is possible to have a secular government or a secular education, secular math problems. In the same way, when we come to the question of what tools, what strategies should I use for my business, the myth of secularization has pervaded that question also. And when I look around at my Christian brothers and sisters who are doing their best to follow God's law as they build businesses, when it comes time for them to look around for strategies, paradigms, how do I market my business, for instance? How do I do marketing? How do I create a product? What go-to-market product or strategy should I use when I'm going to launch my product? Typically, all of us are going out and grabbing tools and strategies from people who hate God,
Right.
who are in rebellion against God, as though, just with every other form of secularization, as though that would have no consequence for their business, as though doing that over time would not ever provoke the Lord's displeasure.
Right.
And so what I think we need to do is hit a hard reset button, go back to first principles, and if I craft some kind of tool or exercise or strategy for my business to use, and your dad is a great example of doing this well for company culture. I mean, just known in our town. Am I allowed to say your dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've had him on here, so they kind of know.
Good. So when I first landed in this town, by reputation, people were talking about the company that your dad founded and how they had never been in a place where the inner core of the culture of the company was informed by the scriptures. In the same way, I have a very large project of which this book is just the beginning, of building tools and strategies which rest on a firm foundation. In order to give, first I need that for myself, right? As a practitioner, I want it for my kids. And then I want it for the people around me as an option, right?
Right.
Maybe good, maybe bad. I like some of the things that I came up with in the book, but you might not. That's okay. We need to start this conversation.
Right.
Because it actually matters, and we want to be building the things that the Lord will smile upon.
Why do Christians tend to be so bad at making products?
Ooh, that is a loaded question. So I would start with what I just said.
Right.
If you are, there are a lot of reasons, and let's list a few, but let's start here. If you want to build something that is great, and you're trying to think, how do I do that? And you're a Christian, and your first impulse is to go out and study the life of Steve Jobs, a guy who absolutely trashed his family, right? Just left wives in his wake, did horrendous things in the middle of his company, and yes, achieved some amazing things, right?
Yep.
But was not motivated primarily by love of God and love for neighbor, right? He was motivated by aesthetic things, some of which are legit, some of which aren't. Went on vision trips to India before he made the first Apple computer. Was part of the hippie movement. That's just one example, okay? But if that's what you're going to do, you're going to find yourself immediately in conflict, okay? Immediately in conflict because you're following a blueprint which is going in a different direction than what the Lord commanded you to do.
Right.
So either your product is going to be crappy, right? It's not going to be very good, or your Christianity is going to be crappy, but not both. Right? You can't have a good product and a good Christianity.
You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Correct. Following someone who doesn't, becoming a disciple of someone who doesn't honor the Lord. So I think that's reason number one. And if I can just throw in a reason number two, a startling lack of imagination and wonder. Right? So
yep.
So if you can't step outside as a business owner or a product creator and every day have some sort of wow moment looking at the design of the world around us and wonder, why did God do it that way, right? Why did God make rain the way that he made it, where it's this incredible, heavenly, literally self-propagating system that balances itself, gives seasons in their due times. Why did God do that? Right? If your life isn't filled with that kind of wonder, which should drive you to a different level of ambition, right? Because if you're trying to imitate what God's done, you better start working on it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need a lot more of that in our business.
Because even though you understand why it's here, because God created it, doesn't mean that you need to forget that it's still magnificent.
Correct.
And I love the quote that beauty inspires greatness.
Yes.
And we live in a beautiful world, and as Christians, we know the reason for that. We know who made it, and so we should be striving to create our own beautiful worlds.
That's right. And it's not like we can't meditate on these things, right? So why did God make an expanse first, right? Why did he separate the waters from the waters? Why did he make vegetation? Why did he make so many animals? Some of which are we ever going to see them all? I don't know. Why did
Probably
he do
not.
that? And then to go back to the scriptures again and again, and to try to learn from that as a product designer. So I'll give you just one little example. We're told that the sun and the stars were put in the sky to rule the sky and to help us know time, right? To help us with time. You and I are actually really bad at time. We're bad at telling time. We need help to understand what time it is. Some products exploit the fact that we're bad at telling time. So Facebook is a great example. Facebook, when it knows algorithmically that you're about to check out, now is when it's going to start throwing the really interesting things in front of you, right? No, stay on. But the Lord actually intended us to have help with time so that we could fulfill our dominion mandate. So what if you made a social app, just reflecting on this, that gently told you, hey, you've been on here a little too long.
You've been on here for half an hour.
Yeah, exactly. And things got less and less interesting, and it got harder to navigate, or something.
Right, yeah. And interestingly, some of the greatest products, even militarily, that have been created, airplanes and such, are modeled after
Correct.
Birds and all sorts and things such as that.
That's right.
And so we should be seeking to do a similar thing in our product creation elsewhere.
Yes. The Lord is our master, and we need to apprentice ourselves to our master.
Yeah.
And take his work seriously.
Why have we lost that?
Boy, that is probably over my pay grade, that question. But our products are symptomatic of what our general worldview is, right? And so the further and further we get from a worldview which honors God as creator, which honors the fact that he made a rational and orderly world. The further we get away from that, the more everything that we do will become the opening ceremony at the Olympics in France. It's going to become uglier and uglier, more and more utilitarian. It's not on accident that as we began to believe the materialist lie, that we are just a bunch of atoms bouncing off of one another, that our products became more and more ugly and more utilitarian. Or from a different angle, and you see this a lot in user experience circles, when we start believing that there was something called objective truth, objective beauty, that our products now really just take the shape of whatever the moment is.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and
Correct.
when the beholder is pagan and has no sense of right and wrong,
Yes.
turns out that's the beholder and also the creator.
Yes, that's right.
Who does not believe that? Who believes that what is beautiful is what they believe is beautiful?
That's right.
Not what's objectively. Here we are. Someone described the situation in France at the Olympics as, "Oh, look, 200 years of paganism leads to its natural conclusion."
Exactly right. And so, we have been given by God. People have been given common grace throughout civilizations. There are things that have an echo of beauty, but as I said before, I think that we need to have the kind of imaginative outlook that says, what will a chair be like in 50,000 years? What will communication be like in 50,000 years? What will the way that we talk to each other remotely be like in 50,000 years? I don't know that we need to be quite as excited that this thing has 3 cameras on it, right? Like, okay, great. Do we not have loftier ambitions as Christians?
Yeah, or when Apple announced that you could rearrange the home screen however you wanted.
Right.
And the headline was like, Apple announces this and the crowd goes wild. And Elon Musk's response was, okay.
Right.
Really? That's what the big thing is?
A little bit of a side note, but I think one of the reasons why Elon Musk is such a popular figure is because here you have a guy, a pagan, who dares to think 100 years, 200 years into the future and build aggressively as though, he wanted to get there.
Right.
And it's so different from what we're thinking about.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a reason he's excelling in everything.
Yeah. And the fact that someone has a vision that far ahead, which is really not that far ahead, but that someone has a vision that far ahead is kind of astounding. And that's just really sad because Christians should be the ones doing that, right?
Right.
Is this world not ours?
Yeah.
Are we not called to steward it? Are we not called to dream about what it could be?
Right. Where does Great Commission Design and also Red Balloon come into this?
Yeah, great question. Great Commission Design was a small business that I created to help pastors after my experience as a pastor of a small church. It's a little bit weird in the modern world. People go out and plant churches, and a lot of times pastors have to be like the marketing wing of their church, or build websites or do these things. It's just strange, right?
Right. Not natural for them.
Not natural for them. So we built a business. I say we because I got my son involved pretty quickly. Built a business where pastors can sign up and we just take it over for them. They don't ever have to think about it. They just email or give us a call when they need something changed. That has been great. To be honest with you, my son runs that 100%. I don't touch it at all now. Yeah. So he does all the customer service interfaces with clients. And so I don't do that. Where does Red Balloon fit into this? Red Balloon's a great example of an aggressive business pushing for what's good in the world. Red Balloon. So for anyone in the audience that doesn't know, Red Balloon is a free speech and medical privacy oriented recruiting and software company. And really what we're doing is trying to bring back the same kind of meritocracy that made Amazon.com an exciting place to be to the American workplace, and push back against these companies that hire and promote based on things like your skin color, and discriminate based on things like your gender, your skin color, things like that. We want workplaces in which people receive reward for their hard work, which is biblical. It takes a lot of courage and ingenuity right now, especially when your ambition is as high as the whole country.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're working on every day.
And the idea behind Red Balloon was a job board where people can connect with other people who just want to work.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yep. As we kind of wrap up, I always like to ask, what's your biggest regret?
Well, I've got, I have failed a lot. I'll answer this from a positive direction that'll actually answer the question. Every time that I have come back and asked, what do the scriptures really say? Have I gone deep enough on this topic? And this is true of family, theology,
all of it,
everything. And realized, I just kind of let it go, that I wasn't asking these questions deeply enough. And I kind of let myself believe that however everyone else was doing it was just fine. I can just go along to get along the same way that I just described people doing in business every day. When I take the time to go back to the scriptures and ask, what did God really say? What has God told me already that I should do? Let's just clear everything else out. Let's just make this really simple. What does God say? And I'm going to take the time to understand that. Always, I have entered into a time of a new level of peace and of joy and satisfaction in the Lord. In other words, I have always found it to be the case in every aspect of life that obedience is just better, right? And the regret is the times where I have not been diligent enough about doing that. It's almost selfish the way that I would want to do that now, right? Because I want that better life that comes about through obedience. And the Lord has given me the blueprint. It's right there. I mean, it takes work sometimes to think through it and weigh things and all of that. But if I could do it all over, I would be more diligent about that earlier in all things.
Right. What's your biggest piece of advice you would give to anyone watching?
That.
Be obedient.
Those things that you suspect, you feel in your heart of hearts, something's a little bit off about this, but I'm sure it's fine. in your family, for the purposes of this discussion, in your workplace and in your work itself, in your discipline, right? That might be off. I'm not sure if that's really, it's probably fine. I've got to survive somehow, right? That mentality, I would get rid of that as quickly as possible and do whatever you can to take the time to understand what the Lord wants, because he wants something good for you.
Right. Where can people find you and all your work online?
So the book you can find at undiscoveredbook.com. That's going to take you right to an Amazon page so that you can order the book from there. I would love it if there were more people in dialogue about the invasion of the will of the Lord into the workplace on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a pretty funny public square because in many ways there's just a lot that you shouldn't do on LinkedIn. And I do my best, not in a crass way, but I do my best to try to just poke at that and be a little bit of a rule breaker on LinkedIn. And I would love it if more people were joining me there to do so.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks. It's been great.
See you guys.
would be, not a little, you would be, not a little.